The smallest act of kindness can change a life you have never even imagined. Marcus Reed did not know why that thought stayed with him every morning, but as he walked home from school beneath the warm afternoon sun, it echoed quietly in the back of his mind. The sidewalks of Oakwood were crowded with people finishing errands, parents picking up groceries, and workers hurrying toward their cars after long shifts. The air carried the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, mixed with the faint scent of cut grass drifting from front yards. Marcus adjusted the straps of his worn backpack and continued down Maple Street, following the same route he had taken hundreds of times before. At 16 years old, he understood responsibility better than most teenagers. His mother worked 2 jobs. Money was often tight. Free time was rare. Yet despite the challenges, Marcus had developed a habit of noticing people others ignored. Elderly neighbors carrying heavy bags. Children struggling to reach something on a high shelf. Strangers trying to cross busy intersections. He never thought much about it. Helping simply felt natural. As he approached a small public park near the center of town, something unusual caught his attention. An elderly white man stood beside a wooden bench near the walking path. His silver hair moved slightly in the afternoon breeze. One hand rested on a cane while the other gripped a paper grocery bag that appeared much heavier than it should have been. People walked past him without stopping. Some glanced briefly before continuing on their way. Marcus slowed his pace. The man appeared frustrated. A gallon of milk and several canned goods had slipped from the top of the bag and now rested awkwardly against his chest. The strain was visible in his shoulders. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before changing direction and walking toward him. The man noticed him approaching and immediately seemed cautious. Years of living alone had apparently taught him to be careful around strangers. Marcus stopped a respectful distance away. "Sir, would you like some help carrying those?" he asked. The elderly man studied him carefully. His expression remained guarded. "I can manage," he replied. His voice was firm but tired. Marcus nodded politely. "Okay." He turned slightly as if preparing to leave. Then the bag shifted unexpectedly in the man's arms. One of the canned goods slipped free and rolled across the sidewalk before stopping near a flower bed. Marcus quickly stepped forward, picked it up and handed it back. The elderly man stared at him for a second longer than necessary. Something about the teenager's calm expression seemed to soften his resistance. Finally he sighed. Maybe a little help would not hurt. Marcus smiled. Together they adjusted the groceries into a more comfortable position. As they began walking slowly through the park, sunlight filtered through the trees overhead, creating moving patterns across the pavement. The old man introduced himself as Walter Whitman. Marcus introduced himself in return. Neither realized it at the time, but that simple conversation beside a park bench was the beginning of something neither of them would ever forget. Around them, the town continued its ordinary afternoon routine. Cars passed. Birds settled on branches. Children laughed in the distance. Yet hidden within that ordinary moment was the first step toward a future that would change Marcus Reed's life forever. Marcus Reed walked beside Walter Whitman through the park at an unhurried pace, matching his steps to the older man's slower rhythm. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through rows of oak trees, painting shifting patterns across the sidewalk. Children chased one another across a nearby field while a gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass through the air. Walter held his cane in one hand and steadied the grocery bag with the other, though now the weight seemed easier to manage with Marcus carrying several of the heavier items. For a few minutes neither spoke very much. The silence was comfortable rather than awkward. Marcus had always been good at recognizing when someone needed conversation, and when someone simply appreciated company. As they reached the edge of the park, Walter finally glanced toward him. "You help strangers often?" he asked. Marcus shrugged slightly. "Sometimes." Walter raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes." Marcus smiled. "Whenever I can." The answer seemed to surprise the older man. He studied Marcus for a moment before looking forward again. "Most people are usually too busy." Marcus noticed something in Walter's tone. Not bitterness exactly. More like disappointment accumulated over many years. They continued walking along a quiet residential street lined with tidy lawns and flower gardens. Wind chimes rang softly from a nearby porch. Somewhere a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically across a patch of green grass. The neighborhood felt peaceful, almost frozen in time. Walter eventually pointed toward a modest white house at the end of the block. "That is mine." Marcus looked at it carefully. The house was well maintained but showed signs of age. The shutters needed fresh paint. Several flower beds required attention. A wooden rocking chair rested on the front porch. The place felt lived in but lonely. When they reached the driveway, Marcus carried the groceries all the way to the front door. Walter unlocked it slowly and stepped inside. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating framed family photographs that covered nearly every wall. Marcus could not help noticing them. Smiling faces, graduation pictures, holiday gatherings, evidence of a life filled with people who apparently were no longer around. Walter noticed his gaze. "My family," he said quietly. Marcus nodded respectfully. "Looks like a lot of good memories." Walter stood silently for a moment. "Yes, good memories." There was a sadness beneath the words that Marcus did not miss. He placed the groceries on the kitchen counter and prepared to leave. "Well, sir, I should probably head home." Walter looked genuinely disappointed. "Already?" The question surprised both of them. Marcus laughed softly. "My mother worries if I stay out too late." Walter nodded. "Good woman." As Marcus moved toward the door, he noticed a stack of unopened mail resting on a small table. Several envelopes had slipped onto the floor. Without thinking, he bent down and organized them into a neat pile. It was a simple gesture, barely worth noticing. Yet Walter watched him carefully. Many people would have ignored it. Marcus simply saw something that needed doing. Before leaving, he paused on the front porch. "Take care, Mr. Whitman." Walter leaned lightly against the doorway. For the first time since they met, a genuine smile appeared on his face. "Thank you, Marcus." The teenager waved and started down the walkway. As he disappeared down the sidewalk, Walter remained standing on the porch watching him go. The evening sunlight bathed the neighborhood in warm gold, and for the first time in a very long while, the old man no longer felt completely alone. The next afternoon, Marcus found himself taking the same route through Oakwood without fully admitting to himself why. School had ended an hour earlier. His backpack rested comfortably against his shoulders as he crossed familiar intersections and passed the small bakery where the smell of warm bread drifted onto the sidewalk. The sky was bright blue, and sunlight reflected from parked cars lined along the street. Part of him wondered whether he would see Walter again. Another part felt slightly foolish for thinking about it so much. After all, they had only met once. Yet something about the old man lingered in his thoughts. Perhaps it was the loneliness Marcus had noticed in the house. Perhaps it was the way Walter had stood on the porch watching him leave. As Marcus approached the neighborhood, he spotted the White House almost immediately. Walter was outside near one of the flower beds, slowly pulling weeds while leaning heavily on his cane between movements. The task appeared exhausting. Marcus hesitated briefly before walking toward the yard. Walter looked up and seemed genuinely surprised. Then his face brightened with recognition. "Well," he said with a smile, "look who decided to visit." Marcus laughed softly. "I was just passing through." Walter raised an eyebrow. "Of course you were." Both of them knew that explanation was not entirely true. Marcus glanced at the flower bed. "Need some help?" Walter looked down at the half-finished work and nodded. "I would not turn it down." Within minutes, Marcus was kneeling beside the flowers, carefully clearing weeds and loose branches. The rich scent of fresh soil filled the air. Birds chirped from nearby trees while a gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Walter settled into a chair on the porch and watched. Occasionally, he pointed toward a stubborn patch of weeds or offered advice about the plants. Time seemed to move differently there. Slower, simpler, more peaceful. After nearly an hour, the flower bed looked completely transformed. Bright colors emerged from beneath tangled growth. Walter stared at the result with obvious satisfaction. "You have a good eye," he said. Marcus shrugged. "Not really. I just pulled what did not belong." Walter chuckled. "Sometimes that is all it takes." The comment seemed deeper than gardening somehow. As they sat on the porch afterward drinking cold lemonade Walter had prepared, conversation came more naturally than before. Marcus spoke about school, basketball, and his dream of attending college someday. Walter listened carefully to every word. He asked thoughtful questions. Unlike many adults, he never interrupted or dismissed Marcus's ideas. He seemed genuinely interested. Eventually Marcus asked about the photographs he had seen inside the house. Walter's expression softened immediately. He described his late wife, Eleanor. He spoke about their travels, their children, and holidays spent gathered around a crowded dinner table. As he shared the memories, his eyes reflected both happiness and sadness. Marcus listened quietly. The old man was not simply telling stories. He was reliving pieces of a life that had gradually grown quieter over the years. The afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the porch floorboards as the hours passed. When Marcus finally stood to leave, Walter looked disappointed again. "Will you stop by tomorrow?" he asked casually, trying not to sound too hopeful. Marcus smiled. "If I am passing through." Walter laughed aloud. "Then I suppose I will see you tomorrow." As Marcus walked down the sidewalk, he glanced back once. Walter remained on the porch, smiling to himself. For the first time in years, the old house no longer seemed quite so empty, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt as though he had found a place where his presence truly mattered. Marcus arrived at the small corner cafe the following morning, the smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries filling the air as he walked in, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows and casting warm patterns on the wooden floor. He spotted a few familiar faces at tables, people engrossed in conversations or quietly reading newspapers, yet his attention was drawn to Walter, who was already seated near the window, a soft smile on his face as he sipped a cup of tea and watched the world pass by outside, the gentle hum of morning activity creating a comforting backdrop. Marcus approached, carrying his backpack, and Walter gestured for him to sit, the two exchanging greetings that were casual yet tinged with a developing bond, their conversation quickly moving from pleasantries to stories of yesterday's small adventures, Marcus recounting moments of his walk and tasks he completed at school while Walter listened intently, nodding, occasionally offering small pieces of wisdom about patience and observation. As Marcus removed his jacket and set it beside him, Walter leaned forward slightly, pointing out a newspaper article on a nearby table about neighborhood events, drawing connections between community efforts and the subtle changes he noticed around his property, the two of them discussing local projects, Marcus offering his insights, Walter encouraging his observations, fostering a sense of engagement and trust, the dynamic between them growing more fluid, like two people learning to navigate a rhythm together. After finishing their drinks, they decided to take a short walk through the nearby park, the crisp morning air invigorating them as they observed children playing and neighbors walking dogs, Walter occasionally pausing to comment on the small details he loved about the area, the texture of leaves, the pattern of sunlight on the ground, the way birds moved through the trees, while Marcus listened, asking questions and sharing thoughts about school and friends, the dialogue creating a connection that felt natural and easy, bridging the gap between their age and life experiences. They stopped at a small bench near a fountain. Watching the water ripple gently and listening to the soft sound it made, Walter shared more about his past community work and hobbies, emphasizing the value of small consistent acts of kindness, and Marcus reflected on how those actions shaped the people around him, realizing that his own small contributions, like helping others at school or assisting neighbors, carried more weight than he had previously considered. As they walked back toward Walter's house, they noticed a young family struggling with grocery bags, and without hesitation Marcus offered to help, Walter watching with a pleased expression, reinforcing the lesson of active kindness and showing by example how engagement with others created positive ripples in the community. Their conversation afterwards centered around the impact of those gestures, the pair laughing lightly at the minor missteps but enjoying the shared purpose, the sun now fully above them, casting bright warmth over the neighborhood, the atmosphere filled with optimism and potential for more meaningful encounters, strengthening the emerging bond and mutual respect between the boy and the elderly man, setting the tone for the days to come. The next morning, Marcus woke to the soft golden light spilling through the blinds, a sense of anticipation stirring as he prepared for the day, slipping into his favorite hoodie and worn sneakers, checking the small notebook in his backpack to review plans for helping others. As he stepped outside, the crisp morning air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant hum of traffic, and he felt a quiet excitement about meeting Walter again, the elderly man whose gentle presence had already begun to shape Marcus's understanding of responsibility and compassion. the two having formed a subtle but meaningful bond through shared small acts of kindness and conversation about life lessons. Walking through the neighborhood, Marcus noticed familiar faces nodding and smiling as he passed, a small sense of pride swelling in him as he recalled the times he had assisted neighbors with errands, simple gestures that left lasting impressions, each interaction reinforcing the idea that consistent, thoughtful actions could ripple out to affect a larger community. Arriving at Walter's house, the porch glowed in the sunlight and Walter greeted him warmly, the two sharing a casual laugh about yesterday's adventure, their dialogue effortlessly blending humor and reflection, Marcus recounting school events and minor mishaps while Walter offered anecdotes about patience, observation, and noticing small details in everyday life, his voice calm but engaging, inviting Marcus to see the world with both curiosity and empathy, a mentorship unfolding naturally as they discussed how minor acts of service can create connections and trust within a community. After a brief chat, Walter suggested they visit the local library to pick up books related to neighborhood projects and volunteer opportunities, and Marcus agreed enthusiastically. The walk there filled with shared commentary on passing storefronts, children playing, and birds darting through trees, each detail prompting insights and questions that led to deeper conversations about responsibility, personal growth, and the impact of consistent effort, the dynamic between youth and experience creating a rhythm of learning and reflection that felt both comfortable and energizing. At the library, they browsed the aisles, selecting books on urban gardening, local history, and community improvement, Marcus expressing excitement about implementing ideas at school, and within his neighborhood, Walter encouraging his enthusiasm while gently guiding him to consider practical steps, the atmosphere alive with the potential for discovery, learning, and proactive engagement, the elderly man occasionally pausing to share stories that illustrated broader lessons about life, patience, and perseverance. As they left the library, Marcus spotted a small stray dog near a park bench, and with Walter's nod of approval, he took a few moments to ensure the animal was safe and comfortable, demonstrating the application of compassion in real time, the act reinforcing the teachings from their conversations, deepening the bond between boy and mentor, and subtly highlighting the theme that small, consistent actions of care and attentiveness can create significant positive change, the morning unfolding into a blend of learning, action, and meaningful connection that set the tone for the continuing journey of growth and community impact. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, Marcus and Walter continued their routine walk through the neighborhood, the streets alive with the chatter of children returning from school and the distant hum of traffic, creating a gentle soundtrack for reflection and conversation. Marcus carried a small bag of groceries, a gesture of thoughtfulness for Walter, who appreciated the care and a soft smile and the occasional chuckle about minor mishaps during their previous errands, the bond between boy and elder growing stronger with each shared experience, their dialogue flowing effortlessly from local news to lessons about kindness, resilience, and community responsibility, the rhythm of their interaction demonstrating the power of consistent, thoughtful engagement. As they passed by a small community garden, Marcus noticed a withering plant, and together they stopped to water it, adjusting supports and carefully arranging soil, the simple act reinforcing the broader lessons Walter had imparted about attention to detail and nurturing growth in both people and places, each movement deliberate and mindful, fostering a sense of accomplishment and reinforcing the importance of taking initiative. Continuing along their path, Marcus spotted a young boy struggling with his bicycle chain, and with Walter's guidance, he approached to offer help, patiently explaining how to realign the gears while maintaining a calm, encouraging tone, the moment serving as an impromptu lesson in empathy and problem-solving, illustrating to Marcus the tangible impact small interventions could have on others' lives, while also providing an opportunity to reflect on his own experiences receiving help and guidance in the past. As they reached the park bench near the community center, they paused to rest, observing the ebb and flow of activity around them, the laughter of children, the rhythmic bouncing of basketballs, and the quiet conversations among neighbors creating a living mosaic of communal life. Marcus absorbing the subtle dynamics of shared space, learning how to navigate social interactions with consideration and awareness, guided by Walter's gentle observations and pointed questions that encouraged him to think critically about human behavior and the role of service in fostering connection. On their way home, they passed a small convenience store where Marcus decided to buy a few essentials for a neighbor in need, the act spontaneous yet intentional, reflecting the lessons of generosity and attentiveness Walter had instilled over weeks of collaboration, the process reinforcing the notion that consistent, thoughtful actions, no matter how small, accumulate into meaningful influence within the community. Marcus internalizing these principles as he carried his purchases and considered the next steps for extending support to those around him, the afternoon unfolding into a seamless blend of learning, action, and reflection, further solidifying the mentorship and mutual respect that had developed between the two, each gesture a tangible manifestation of kindness, responsibility, and the enduring impact of youth guided by wisdom. The morning sun cast long golden rays across the quiet neighborhood streets as Marcus and Walter set out for another day together, the air filled with the distant hum of school buses and the chirping of birds creating a calm but energetic backdrop for their walk. Marcus carried a small notebook filled with observations and sketches he had made about the people he saw and the small acts of kindness he had performed the day before, reflecting on how these simple gestures, like helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries or returning a lost wallet, could ripple through the community in ways larger than he imagined, while Walter, walking beside him with a calm demeanor and a soft smile, encouraged him to consider not only the actions themselves but the intentions behind them and the feelings of those affected, guiding Marcus through a mental exercise of empathy and perspective-taking that strengthened both his awareness and his sense of responsibility. As they passed the local park, Marcus noticed a group of children attempting to organize a game but struggling with disagreements over rules, and he, prompted by Walter's gentle encouragement, approached to mediate, offering suggestions to foster fairness and teamwork while observing how subtle leadership and guidance could positively influence the dynamics of the group, a practical lesson that complemented the moral insights they had discussed earlier, reinforcing Marcus's understanding that every act of kindness could also involve listening, negotiation, and fostering community harmony. Continuing their walk, they arrived at a small neighborhood cafe where Walter had promised Marcus a treat for his recent efforts. And while sipping their drinks and sharing quiet conversation, Marcus learned to read subtle social cues and appreciate the depth of human interactions, noticing how the barista's smile or a customer's polite nod could signify appreciation and connection. Insights Walter highlighted to illustrate how attentiveness to social nuances could enhance empathy and human engagement, further developing Marcus's emotional intelligence. As they moved toward the local library, they encountered a senior man struggling to organize his bags after a morning errand, and Marcus immediately stepped forward, assisting him with care and patience, receiving words of gratitude that resonated deeply, reinforcing the tangible impact of his consistent good deeds, and highlighting the lesson Walter had emphasized about the personal satisfaction and communal benefit derived from everyday acts of service, a moment that left Marcus thoughtful about how small actions could generate significant positive change. Finally, as they neared the quiet alley that led back to Marcus's home, Walter prompted him to reflect on the day's events, encouraging him to mentally map the sequence of acts, the responses of others, and the feelings evoked, guiding Marcus to consolidate his experiences into broader lessons about responsibility, integrity, and the unseen influence one person can have on a community, leaving both with a profound sense of connection, purpose, and anticipation for the next day, where more opportunities to apply these principles would arise, and further strengthen the bond between mentor and mentee, their shared journey demonstrating the transformative power of consistent, thoughtful, and compassionate action across everyday life. The day had barely begun when Marcus and Walter stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant chatter of neighbors starting their routines, and Walter spoke first, saying, "Every small action matters, Marcus, even the ones nobody sees," setting the tone for the day's lessons. As they walked down the quiet streets lined with oak trees and blooming flowers, Marcus reflected on his experiences from the previous days, feeling a growing sense of purpose and a curiosity about how his consistent efforts of helping people, like returning lost items or assisting elderly neighbors with their errands, could ripple out to affect the community at large, and Walter guided him to notice the subtleties of human interactions, the small nods, smiles, and gestures that conveyed appreciation and trust, reinforcing that the impact of good deeds often extended beyond immediate gratitude. Passing by the local community center, Marcus noticed a group of younger children struggling with a project, and with Walter's encouragement, he approached them to offer advice, help organize materials, and mediate disagreements, learning how effective communication, patience, and empathy could transform challenges into cooperative efforts. observing the joy and relief on the children's faces as they accomplished their goal together and understanding that leadership could emerge from thoughtful, compassionate guidance rather than authority alone. Further, down the street they encountered a man struggling to carry multiple bags of groceries, and Marcus instinctively stepped forward to assist, while Walter highlighted the importance of attentiveness, timing, and sensitivity in helping, showing Marcus how these small, deliberate actions not only supported others physically but also nurtured emotional well-being, creating bonds of trust and mutual respect that strengthened the social fabric of the neighborhood. Later, as they reached a local cafe to rest, Walter encouraged Marcus to analyze and internalize the day's experiences, discussing the subtle ways that consistent, genuine kindness cultivated not only positive outcomes for recipients but also confidence, self-worth, and clarity for the giver, demonstrating that acts of service were both outward-facing and reflective, shaping character and influencing future decisions. Finally, as they approached the small alley leading back to Marcus's modest home, Walter prompted a reflective conversation about goals, intentions, and the unseen effects of cumulative good actions, reinforcing that while individual deeds may seem minor, the combination of dedication, awareness, and empathy could transform both the giver and the community, leaving Marcus inspired, thoughtful, and prepared to continue contributing positively in ways both visible and hidden, understanding that each day presented opportunities to practice compassion, integrity, and proactive engagement that would ripple outward in meaningful and lasting ways. The next morning, Marcus woke to the soft light filtering through the cracked blinds of his small room, the air carrying a mixture of cool freshness and distant city sounds, and he felt a quiet anticipation for the day ahead, remembering the lessons from the previous days about observation, patience, and the ripple effect of kindness. He stepped outside into the neighborhood, greeting familiar faces with nods and smiles that reflected the subtle trust he had begun to earn, and he noticed how the elderly Mrs. Thompson was struggling with her recycling bins at the end of the driveway, her frail frame burdened with the weight of responsibility, prompting Marcus to offer assistance, carrying the bins carefully to the curb, exchanging encouraging words and listening to her stories with attentiveness, reinforcing the importance of connection and attentiveness in small acts of service. Later, as he walked to the corner store, Marcus spotted a young woman whose car had stalled, and with a calm but proactive demeanor, he offered to help, guiding her through contacting roadside assistance while ensuring she felt supported and safe, showcasing that courage and empathy could coexist without grand gestures, and that the integrity of one's actions left impressions far beyond the immediate moment. Returning home, he encountered Walter in the small backyard garden, tending to tomato plants with meticulous care, and Marcus observed the patience and consistency required in nurturing growth, drawing parallels between gardening and human relationships, understanding that both required regular attention, respect, and thoughtful intervention, lessons that deepened his comprehension of responsibility and foresight. As the day progressed, Marcus saw opportunities to integrate kindness with initiative, helping a neighbor retrieve groceries that had fallen from a cart while simultaneously modeling problem-solving and calm reassurance to younger children observing the scene, learning that leadership through empathy and service could manifest in moments of attentiveness and careful judgment, rather than authority alone. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to lower and the sky painted shades of orange and lavender, Marcus reflected on how his small, deliberate efforts were creating subtle shifts in the community dynamic, encouraging collaboration, gratitude, and awareness, reinforcing that continuous, conscientious action cultivated both personal growth and social harmony, and that the values of patience, empathy, and proactive assistance had the power to transform ordinary days into meaningful experiences that resonated with both the helper and the helped, leaving Marcus with a sense of purpose, fulfillment, and anticipation for the cumulative impact of his consistent, compassionate actions. The following afternoon arrived with an unusual sense of anticipation hanging in the air, though Marcus could not explain why. The sky above Oakwood was clear and bright, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees as he made his way toward Walter's house after school. Along the route, familiar faces greeted him with friendly waves. Mrs. Thompson smiled from her porch. The owner of the corner market nodded as Marcus passed. Even the children playing basketball near the community center called out his name. Over the past several weeks, his daily acts of kindness had quietly become part of the neighborhood's rhythm. Yet Marcus never thought of himself as special. To him, helping people simply felt like the right thing to do. When he reached Walter's house, he immediately noticed something different. A dark sedan was parked in the driveway. The vehicle looked expensive and completely out of place in the quiet neighborhood. Marcus slowed slightly. Before he could knock, the front door opened. Walter stepped onto the porch wearing a neatly pressed button-down shirt and a smile that seemed unusually wide. "Perfect timing," Walter said. Marcus laughed softly. "That sounds suspicious." Walter chuckled. "Maybe it is." As they entered the house, Marcus noticed another man seated at the kitchen table. He appeared to be in his late 50s, wearing a tailored suit and polished shoes. A leather briefcase rested beside him. The stranger stood immediately and extended his hand. "Marcus Reed," he said warmly. "I have heard a great deal about you." Marcus shook his hand politely, unsure what was happening. Walter motioned for everyone to sit. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, illuminating the framed family photographs that covered the walls. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Walter leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, do you remember the day we met?" Marcus nodded. "You were carrying groceries." Walter smiled. "And you could have kept walking." Marcus shrugged. "I just helped." Walter exchanged a glance with the man beside him. "That is exactly the point." The suited man opened his briefcase and removed several folders. Marcus looked at them curiously. The atmosphere suddenly felt serious. Walter folded his hands together. "Over the years I have met many people. Some successful, some wealthy, some powerful. But very few people have impressed me the way you have." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Praise always made him uneasy. Walter continued. "You never helped me because you wanted something. You never expected rewards. You never asked for recognition." The room fell quiet. Outside, wind rustled the leaves of the old oak tree near the porch. Walter's voice softened. "That kind of character matters." The suited man finally spoke. "Mr. Whitman has spent weeks telling me about your kindness, your work ethic, your goals, and your dream of attending college someday." Marcus blinked in surprise. He had mentioned that dream only once during a conversation on the porch. Walter remembered every word. The realization touched him deeply. The man slid one of the folders across the table. "We have been discussing opportunities." Marcus stared at the folder but did not reach for it. His heart began beating faster. He looked from Walter to the stranger and back again. Something significant was happening. He could feel it. Yet he had no idea that the conversation about to unfold would become the turning point that changed the direction of his entire future. Marcus sat in stunned silence, his fingers lightly brushing the edges of the folder as Walter and the suited man watched him closely, their expressions patient yet expectant. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting the small dust motes that danced in the air, and for a moment the world outside seemed to pause, allowing the gravity of the moment to sink in fully, the young man's mind racing through a flurry of possibilities and fears, realizing that the simple acts of kindness he had performed every day had unexpectedly led to this pivotal juncture in his life, a moment where recognition and opportunity converged, challenging him to absorb both the reality and the potential future unfolding before him. Walter leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes sparkling with pride, recounting stories of how Marcus had been there day after day for those in need, never asking for anything in return, and the suited man nodded emphatically, explaining that the network of community leaders and philanthropists had been inspired by Marcus's integrity and compassion, eager to offer him not only scholarships but mentorships, internships, and connections that could propel him toward the dreams he had scarcely spoken aloud, the weight of the gesture causing a mix of elation and disbelief to swell within Marcus, yet a calm determination began to replace the initial shock. As he remembered the mornings he had spent helping Walter with errands, the afternoons spent delivering groceries to elderly neighbors, and the evenings he had spent tutoring younger children at the community center, realizing that each small effort had quietly built a bridge to a future far larger than he could have imagined, Walter's voice softened as he described the value of character over circumstance, the integrity of Marcus's actions standing as a testament to what could be achieved without expectation of reward. And Marcus found himself smiling, the initial tension melting into a warmth of understanding and purpose, the room filled with a sense of possibility that seemed almost tangible, the air humming with the unspoken promise of new beginnings. The suited man opened another folder and revealed letters of acceptance and support, each envelope a tangible acknowledgement of Marcus's efforts. His heart beating faster as he imagined the paths these opportunities could unlock. His mind swirling with visions of college campuses, meeting mentors, and ultimately using the lessons he had learned to inspire others in his community. Walter clapped a hand gently on Marcus's shoulder, reaffirming that his consistent acts of kindness had created ripples that reached far beyond what he had ever known. And as Marcus finally took a deep breath and allowed himself to fully grasp the magnitude of the moment, a quiet resolve settled within him, knowing that this was the start of a new chapter defined not by luck or chance but by the enduring power of empathy, integrity, and the unwavering choice to do good each day. A lesson that would stay with him forever as he stepped toward a future shaped by the same values that had guided him through every small act leading to this transformative day. The morning sunlight streamed through the high windows of the community center, casting a warm glow over Marcus as he arrived early, backpack slung over one shoulder and determination etched across his young face. A day full of promise unfolding ahead. He moved through the quiet hallways with practiced ease, greeting familiar faces with polite nods, aware that each interaction, however small, contributed to a larger tapestry of trust and respect. And as he approached the elderly gentleman's table, he noticed the subtle shift in demeanor, the way the man's eyes lit up at his arrival, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had forged through consistent acts of kindness. Marcus's heart swelled with a quiet pride, understanding that these small daily commitments were the true measure of character. And as he began helping with organizing materials and setting up for the day's activities, he reflected on the journey that had led him here. The moments of doubt and resilience, the quiet victories and lessons learned, each act of service building upon the last, forming a foundation that would support him through challenges yet unseen. The elderly man, noticing Marcus's thoughtful approach, commented on how much effort he put into every detail, reinforcing the value of attentiveness and compassion, and Marcus listened intently, internalizing the encouragement, his mind racing with ideas of how he could continue to contribute meaningfully to his community while balancing the demands of school and personal growth, the sunlight catching the dust motes around them creating a scene almost ethereal in its simplicity, a visual metaphor for the unseen impact of consistent, selfless acts. And as other volunteers began to arrive, Marcus coordinated seamlessly with them, demonstrating leadership beyond his years, a calm assurance in his movements that belied his age, each interaction marked by patience and empathy. The respect he commanded earned not by words but by the consistent demonstration of integrity and reliability. By midday, the center was bustling with activity, children engaged in reading and arts projects, neighbors exchanging smiles and greetings, and Marcus moved through the space like a quiet anchor, guiding, supporting, and fostering an environment of inclusion and encouragement. And as the elderly man paused to offer a small, appreciative gesture, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment, recognizing that his daily dedication, though modest in appearance, had cultivated ripples of positivity and connection that extended far beyond the walls of the center, a tangible affirmation that the consistent choice to act with kindness and responsibility could create lasting change and set in motion opportunities that would shape his future in ways he was only beginning to imagine. The afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room as the day drew to a close, Marcus felt a profound gratitude for the lessons learned, the relationships nurtured, and the understanding that his actions, rooted in empathy and commitment, were not only shaping his own path but also inspiring those around him. A quiet testament to the transformative power of daily dedication and unwavering integrity. As the morning sunlight spilled across the quiet streets, Marcus felt a mix of anticipation and pride, reflecting on the unexpected turns that had led him to this moment. A young teenager whose consistent acts of kindness toward his elderly neighbor had blossomed into something far greater than he ever imagined. Each day of helping, carrying groceries, fetching mail, and simply listening had strengthened a bond built on trust, empathy, and mutual respect, a connection that transcended age and background. And now, as he watched the community center fill with familiar faces, his heart swelled with a quiet sense of accomplishment, understanding that small, consistent efforts could ripple outward, influencing lives in ways that were both tangible and deeply emotional. And as the elderly man approached, hands slightly trembling with gratitude yet eyes shining with recognition, Marcus felt a profound affirmation of the principle he had lived by, that integrity and compassion, when practiced daily, could reshape not only his own path but also the lives of those around him. Each encounter layered with lessons in patience, humility, and the quiet power of generosity. And as neighbors began to arrive, curious and eager to participate, the atmosphere hummed with excitement and possibility, an energy born not from spectacle but from the authenticity of shared human connection. And as Marcus guided the elderly man to a comfortable seat, engaging him in conversation while ensuring the younger children were welcomed and included, the realization settled in that this was the culmination of countless unseen choices made with care and thoughtfulness, each choice reinforcing the values of responsibility and empathy. And as the community center doors opened to reveal the surprising arrival of 20 sleek SUVs, the crowd paused, eyes wide with astonishment and admiration, whispers of intrigue and appreciation filling the air, and Marcus stood at the center, a symbol of quiet heroism, the embodiment of what happens when dedication and selflessness intersect with opportunity. And as the elderly man introduced him to those stepping out of the vehicles, expressing profound gratitude and acknowledging the impact of his daily acts, Marcus absorbed the moment fully, recognizing that the life-changing events unfolding were not merely about material reward but the validation of a life led with integrity, compassion, and unwavering commitment to others. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the expressions of awe, joy, and heartfelt appreciation around him, Marcus understood that the journey he had embarked upon, characterized by simple, repeated gestures of kindness, had culminated in a transformative moment, affirming that even the smallest acts, when guided by purpose and empathy, could ripple outward, creating unexpected opportunities, profound connections, and lasting change that would resonate far beyond a single day or a single community.